Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Inside the Pigskin, our Thursday night show that talks about the Thursday night game and a lot of the important topics on display. And I have myself a handful of people, including myself. So, without further delay, I'm going to introduce the crew, and then we're going to get out there and talk some football. We encourage any participation in the chat room as well. You talk in the chat room, we'll read your comments out to everybody. But that said, Jeremy, doing double duty this week, my friend. Welcome back, pal.
Oh, happy to be here.
And Jennifer, I'll tell you,
Hi.
sweetheart, welcome back.
Thank you for having me again, sir.
We enjoy having you, Jennifer. Believe me, your work with Candy Ebling is great. What you do on Thursday night is something we all look forward to. And she's back, and now we have all five of us. Last couple of weeks we had four, but now we got the handful. And with that said, Mel Farr got double duty because he had an opportunity to appear on Jennifer's show earlier. Well, welcome back to the big show, Mel.
Thank you. I enjoyed my time with the girls, and I appreciate them inviting me to come on.
We really appreciate you coming on. Thank you again.
And last but not least, Mr. Patriot, my right-hand man, partner in crime. We've done a lot of these things together, right, Steve?
Absolutely. Sorry I missed last week. Unfortunately, Hurricane Ian had something to say about that. We had no power, no internet, almost no house. So, it's good to be alive. I mean, it was a kind of a crazy couple of days there, but we persevered through it. We were very, very lucky in our household. So glad to be back.
I was a betting man. I knew you weren't coming on that show. I only called to make sure you were feeling good. And over the weekend, I had an opportunity to go to Talladega to watch the Yellowwood or something, the Talladega 500, the way I look at it. What an incredible race. I'm wearing this Hendrick Motorsports hat because in Victory Lane, somebody tossed it in the back. I was quick on my feet, grabbed it with my left hand. Nothing like a free cap there in Victory Lane. Candy and Epling and I had a great time over the weekend. And here we are back home, at least this week. Who knows where we're going to be headed, somewhere down the road. Although we'll be pretty busy over the weekend. The Miami Hurricanes on Saturday against North Carolina, which is why I'm wearing my Cane shirt, and Inter Miami on Sunday. So we're going to have a football, but in a much different way. And I wrapped up my Marlins coverage on Tuesday talking to Don Manning. It's been a very busy stretch, a little bit more. But with that said, let me give everybody a little bit of an overview we're talking about tonight, and then I'll get the crew involved. We're going to talk about travel. Does less with travel amount to wins? That'll be the first thing. Former Green Bay Packer Clay Matthews is retiring. I'm sure everybody appreciate him. Odell Beckham Jr., where will he go next after his injury heals? And then we're going to evaluate this year's 0-2 teams and then talk a little bit about last year's 0-2 teams. They had the Thursday night football game between Indianapolis and Denver. And, of course, no show would be complete unless we talked about the Lions and the Patriots, since there's a lot of people from both those areas tonight. And we'll have some parting shots as well and a few other little odds and ends to go with that. So with that said, let's get to the first topic of the day, and I'm going to read off some numbers about travel. Okay, does lesser travel amount to wins? And we'll go right down the order. The Steelers are 1-3 at the moment. They travel 6,442 miles. The Detroit Lions are 1-3, 8,348 miles. Baltimore Ravens, 2 up, 2 down, 9,500 miles. Cleveland Browns, 2 up, 2 down, 9,986 miles. And the Chicago Bears, 2-2, 10,086 miles. And if you're a lottery player, I gave you a bunch of numbers to choose from, and you can win a lottery. I just don't want to know about it. And if you did, use the money wisely. So with that said, I'll go ahead and bring Mel. You've played this game before. Let's talk about the fact that when you look at these records and where they compare to the miles, does it really matter?
Yes and no. Pittsburgh is just not a very good football team right now. Offensively, they have some problems. I know they have a new offensive coordinator over there. I know there's been some rumblings about getting rid of him. Just offensively, they're not a very good football team. I don't think you can blame Mitch Trubisky and all of that. He has some part to do with it, but their play calling is just a little suspect. Obviously, I remember, travel can play. Rest is important in football. I believe that. When I was playing, we used to, for a Sunday game, we'd leave on Friday. And I remember when we were going through to get into playoffs, we had to I think we had to win our last game against New England. So we went to New England, came back. Then we had the wild card game against the Eagles, came back. And then we had the divisional game against the Giants. And then we came back, and then we ended up playing San Francisco in the championship game up in San Francisco in the Bay Area. So I mean, we were on the road the whole time, but we had those cross country trips. It can't just depends on what kind of football team you have. And Coach Robinson was always real good about making sure we're on and off the practice field. Don't stand on our feet too long. Make sure you go home, get plenty of rest. And I think it can play into it a little bit, but those teams that you named, Pittsburgh and Detroit. I can't remember who else you named, but
I got Baltimore, Cleveland Browns, and Chicago Bears. No, none of those teams over 2-2.
Three of those teams aren't good football teams.
Right.
Three of the four of those teams are just not good football teams. They have questions at the quarterback position. And when you don't have that position, when you don't have that guy at that position, it doesn't matter where you play. It's going to be very difficult for you.
Steve?
I agree with that. I think that, a lot of travel, if you're crossing a lot of time zones, that can mess with guys' rest for like teams going to from the West Coast to the East. I mean, they lose a lot of hours when they have these London games. I mean, some guys, they adapt to it very well and some don't. I mean, I've traveled across so many time zones, you lose track of them sometimes. But at the same time, at times when you cross so many time zones, it does mess with your rest and your sleep,
right.
And especially your mental acuity. So, I think that's a real thing. But I agree with what Mel said. Some of those teams just aren't good teams, and not saying they can't turn it around, but right now they're not. And I think the only really good team out of that is Baltimore.
Right.
And other than two meltdowns, they could easily be 4-0.
True. All right, Jennifer.
So, and maybe one of y'all can answer this for me, but my question has always been like, so Mo, you were just giving the example, like you were traveling back and forth to the East Coast from the West Coast, right?
Yes.
So why wouldn't they just, what I've never understood because like in the NBA, you do a West Coast tour or an East Coast tour, essentially, right? And you kind of just stay around. Now, admittedly, the NBA has a game every other night, right? But why wouldn't they just let you guys stay or let the players stay on that coast during that week they don't?
Well, those games were win or go home, so you don't know until you play. The last game was the last game of the season, and I think we had to win that game to get into the playoffs. And then, the next game was a wild card game, and then we had the divisional game, and then ultimately we had the championship game. So we didn't know. We had to win to keep playing, and we were happy to keep traveling because that meant that we won. But I understand some teams do, when they do have a situation where they're playing a couple teams in the same area, they will stay on that coast. I've heard of that before with Seattle, I believe, doing it. Maybe even San Francisco, if they play a couple games back this way, they'll travel to wherever they're playing. Say they're playing the Redskins, and then they got to play Tampa Bay next, and they'll just stay on this side of the country before they go back.
Yeah, the Patriots have done that with Bill Belichick too.
Say that again. I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah, the Patriots have done that with Bill Belichick rather than, like if they have a game in Denver, then the next week they're playing out in LA with the Chargers, or maybe when the Raiders were in Oakland, they would fly to Denver, and then instead of going all the way home to New England, they would fly and spend a week in Southern California and practice there, just so it cuts down on travel time and gives the players more rest. Okay,
cool. And sorry, and it makes sense that it can be better planned out during the regular season than during playoffs. I get that. But essentially, yeah, like Tomlin's in a rebuilding year anyway. Trubisky will be solid when he, has healthy people around him. Not great. Trubisky's not going to be a great and awesome, he's not going to be a legend like, Unitas, Montana. He's just not. That's not going to happen. But I do think some jet lag comes into it a little bit, but you also have to supersede and overcome that. So, I mean, I don't really know that it plays a large part. I think you guys have surmised it and said the best, that there are some really bad teams in that list. So,
All right, before I turn over to Jeremy, subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you have a difficult time going ahead and doing it through the website, go to youtube.com and look for South Florida Tribune. You can hit the subscribe button from there. So with that said, just want to get the promotional stuff out there, and we'll turn it over to Jeremy. But before we do turn over to Jeremy, having covered the Lions for a lot of years going on the road, though, like you, Steve, it isn't easy to go back and forth coast to coast. That's for sure, because you're on a plane unless you're out there. There are times what I would do when I travel with the team is I would travel out there for 2, 3, 4 days in advance, kind of hang out in the city a little bit. I got the team right for the hotel. So, you're staying in these 5-star hotels for like $70, $80, and the Lions had no problem doing it. All I had to do was change my credit card when I got to the front desk, and I was good to go. And staying in a nice hotel, touring the city, but it did make it a lot easier for me to acclimate to the area. There was one instance, I will say before I turn it over to Jeremy, that when I got married out in Lake Tahoe, I ended up getting married. I ended up flying to Oakland, I believe it was at that time, flew back to Detroit, picked up my other half, and then we went to Lake Tahoe. And to do 2 West Coast trips in about a 4 or 5 day period was a pretty taxing situation, especially when you have to go coast to coast. So, I would always try to get in. Now, if I went to Tampa, being from the University of South Florida, I would hang out, see some friends, do things. But every team has to handle things a little differently. So, like Steve said, the time change is almost like a time machine, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, especially when you're traveling east, because you lose hours. I mean, I know when you travel west, you gain some time. It still throws you off a little bit, but when those teams on the West Coast, when they travel to the East Coast, I mean, they're losing,
3
they're
hours.
they're losing some time, and that messes with your rest. It messes with your body clock big time.
Yeah, a lot of West Coast teams struggle when they come back to the East Coast because of what you just said. And even my little trip out to Talladega was no easy picnic when we left about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we got in about 5 local time to get a hotel, and we were lucky to even get that. And then after the race, we had to drive back to our neck of the woods. So it was not an easy, but certainly a worthwhile trip. All right, Jeremy, go ahead.
Well, it also depends on the days of rest while traveling. The one thing that I know is that the players have to be able to recuperate their bodies between the practices, the games, and everything else. And will it equal wins? You don't know, because it depends on the talent level of the teams. And like they said, there are 3 teams that are considered bad teams. Detroit has a horrible defense. I mean, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Bears, they got an okay defense and a horrible O-line. Justin Fields has had, 6 fumbles already?
Right.
And, so there's things like that you have to take into consideration. But the days of rest in between, with no primetime games, then not only are they the second least traveled, the Lions also have the second most days of rest in the NFL, which is going to help with the injury bug that's been plaguing them.
Well, the injuries have been plaguing them forever anyways. But yeah, you're right. 4 of the 5 teams are certainly not very good. Like Steve alluded to, the Baltimore Ravens, the one chance if they didn't make a living squandering leads, that they would be the exception to the rule versus what this group is all about. All right, well, I'm glad we covered that one. There are other subjects that won't take as much time, but they're timely nonetheless. With that said, former Green Bay Packer Clay Matthews is retiring from the NFL. So go around the horn again. Should he have spent his entire career with the Green Bay Packers? Go ahead, Jeremy. You're in the division.
Well, if they wanted him, they'd have re-signed him.
Right.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. His play diminished immediately once AJ Hawk left, you saw that every year his tackles went down, his sacks went down,
Right.
and the way he played coverage went down as well. I mean, the QBR against him, because when he was covering the tight ends and running backs that were coming out of the backfield, QBR against originally was in the high 60s, low 70s. And then after AJ Hawk left, it went immediately to the 80s that same year.
Okay.
So it also depends on the players around you. So that being said, with his diminished play and everything else, it wasn't in their best interest to keep him. He might have been better off to retire then because he looked bad after he left Green Bay.
Jennifer, you have any comments on this one? If you don't,
Yeah, actually, I remember Aaron actively tried really hard to keep Clay. But his numbers did just drastically go down. And I've seen it happen. Like, I think we've all seen it happen where sometimes two players just truly complement each other.
Right.
Like, I've seen it happen with multiple players. And I feel bad for Clay because he is who he was. But in that case, I think it's kind of better to have been a has-been than a never was. Because Clay has a great legacy. Like, let's not kid ourselves. So good for him. And it had to be a very bitter pill to swallow.
Okay, that's good enough. All right, Mel, some thoughts about Clay Matthews.
Well, you said, should he retire a Packer? No, he should have retired. He should have retired a Packer. There's no question about it. Should he stay there his whole career? No, he had to go follow the cheese. He had to go get that bag. Now, he thought he was going to go back to Green Bay, but I think they ended up signing the Smith brothers, and he kind of read the writing on the wall and knew that his time was probably over there. Had an opportunity to go out to LA, go back home and play, and finished out. I believe he finished out his career there. But I mean, he had a great career. I mean, he has nothing to be ashamed about, nothing to hang his head for. He had a great career. That I think he was. There's some durability issues in the latter part of his career when he was in Green Bay. But man, for a stretch there, 3, 4, 5 year stretch, he was a handful. And I'm saying this about a guy that went to that other school, and he was a handful.
That was funny. All right, Steve, top that.
Yeah, it's tough to top that one. He did have a good relationship on the field with AJ Hawk, but I just think as Mel just alluded to, late in his career, it was starting to take a toll on his body. And I think that had more to do with it than anything. And, a lot of these guys, their bodies take a beating. We think of them as indestructible,
Right.
that they're always going to be able to play at that level. But sometimes, your body's going to tell you something else. And I think that's what really happened to him. He wanted to continue playing, and you can't fault a guy for that because your career is really just a blip on the screen. Mel can speak to that, of your life. I mean, the average NFL player plays for about 3 or 4 years, and some guys get to play a lot longer than that. And they want to continue it. And I totally get that. I mean, so, it doesn't diminish anything he's done. You always want to see a guy who played at such a high level for a team retire with that team, but it really happens. It really does in today's game.
Oh, Tom Brady's not retiring with the Patriots. And, they call him the GOAT. Yep. Joe Montana, he didn't retire with San Francisco. Nobody saw that coming. So, I mean, it happens. Like Steve said, it happens.
And the funny thing is, years before Brady left New England, his father kept saying in the news, Tom, the end for Tom here in New England is not going to be pretty. It's going to be ugly. There's going to be a break. And he saw it coming long before it happened. And I mean, that's just the nature of the business. And, hindsight's 20/20, but getting back to Clay Matthews, I mean, I thought there was a stretch of time where he was absolutely dominant in games where he was playing. And, that's rare. And, hats off to him. Hopefully he's healthy enough to enjoy his retirement.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Steve. Clay Matthews' next stop is Canton, Ohio, as a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And you know what? And I'll just make it short and sweet on that because you already said it for me, Steve. Okay. I just hope that he's able to enjoy retirement with the amount of hits.
You really think he's a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of interesting guys getting. I think he could be borderline depending on the veterans. I didn't say right away.
Deion Sanders is a little upset with the Hall of Fame. He said they need to give him a different colored jacket. You know,
Well, that's Deion Sanders.
he
said
they're letting anybody in there now, man. He needs a different colored jacket. He said his bus doesn't belong in there with some of the folks that are getting in there.
Yeah, well, Deion Sanders also once said the Detroit Lions couldn't afford him either, and the Lions ended up.
They had to put him on. They had to put him on layaway.
Pardon me?
He said they'd have to put him on layaway.
Yeah, right. I remember that comment. So I admire what Deion Sanders is doing with Jackson State University. Anything else that comes out of his mouth, my mom always taught me put soap in your mouth because if you're saying something stupid and dirty, do it. So I don't have a lot of, I like what Sanders is doing in his reincarnation as a coach for Jackson State University. I think Clay Matthews could be a borderline guy. Like I said, the criteria to get in the Pro Football Hall of Fame is different than baseball. Remember, what I've learned, and I've attended some of those selection things when I've been to 4 Super Bowls, and the thing is writers are lobbying back and forth with each other to try to get their guy in. So if it doesn't happen right away, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So I think he could be in the Hall of Fame. And when you're playing for the Green Bay Packers and you're successful, it enhances your chances. Now, is he a lot? No, it may take him a while. Hell, it took Floyd Little forever to get in the Hall of Fame, but he ultimately got there. So who's going to sit here and tell you what the criteria is? And I happened to meet Floyd Little many years ago when I was over at the Super Bowl as well. So I actually think Matthews could get in by virtue of his work with the Packers. But the biggest thing, like Steve mentioned, though, is this. Let's just hope Clay Matthews retires and doesn't find himself crippled down the road, and then he can enjoy his retirement. I'd be happy with that. He's made a fair amount of money. So I'm all right with that. Jen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, I could see Julius Peppers because that D with Hawk Peppers and Matthews was sick. Like, that was just a sick D. Like, let's not kid ourselves. So I could truly see, because Julius has the ear of NFL execs and Hall of Fame people. Like, he can, like, if I'm sure that he can help Matthews get into if need be.
Yeah.
So,
Julius Peppers?
yeah.
Okay.
Julius Peppers is Hall of Fame too. And he made me mad a couple of times.
Well, I used to love Julius Peppers. Are you kidding, Jennifer? He was one of my favorite players with the Panthers. I'll ring his endorsement all day long. Panther fan or no Panther fan, I don't care. This guy to me was a heck of a player. Didn't he?
And he was a heck of a basketball player too. He literally was debating going an NBA draft or the NFL draft.
I think he is a product of the University of North Carolina. Is that correct?
He is, and he is the only football player or professional athlete who has played in a Final Four game as well as a Super Bowl.
Very good. Look at some Jennifer, our crack statistician, Jennifer Lewis.
I was like, let me look this up.
No, I wasn't. I was
wrong about the Lions, Mel.
You don't have to mention that,
I'm right about this one.
I was looking at Matthews' numbers. He might get in. I mean, he probably won't be a first ballot, but he'll probably get in. He went to 6 Pro Bowls, 2-time All-Pro, 3-time All-Pro.
Yeah, come on, Jennifer. It's okay to brag about your knowledge. You live in the area. I would think you'd be able to come up with a tidbit like that.
Yeah, so. Like I said, it took a long time for me to forgive Julius after our breakup.
Okay. Well, you forgive him now? Everybody has a breakup once in a while. The NFL, nobody leaves easy. There are very few guys that actually leave without breaking up, right, Steve?
That's why I always tell fans, don't buy a jersey for a guy who's playing now. Buy a jersey for a guy who's retired. And that way you know that he's always going to be on your team,
Smart man. Okay, there you go. All right, well, let's go on to the next topic. Odell Beckham Jr. Where will he go after his injury heals? I'll give you some choices, and there's another one called Other. So is he going to the Green Bay Packers? Is he going to the LA Rams, or see Other? All right, Steve.
I'm going to go Other.
Okay.
And I just have a feeling Odell's going to go to the Chiefs.
Oh, do you?
Just call me crazy.
No kidding.
I think he's going to go to the Chiefs.
Really? Never heard that one before. All right, Mel.
Yeah, I'm gonna go other as well. I think Tom is gonna try to persuade the Bucks to get him.
Ooh.
He needs some help.
So you got him in
Yes, he
Tampa.
does.
Jennifer.
I like what Mel just said, but I really don't like Odell. So mommy said, if I can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
All I ask is where you think he's gonna play.
But at least say a team, Jennifer.
I said I like what you said, Mel.
Oh, okay.
That was the first thing
you
I
have to
said.
list the team. That is a requirement on this show tonight. You must mention the team. So give me one.
I'm going with what Mel said. I like the Bucks thought process.
Okay.
At least for a season. That's what Odell's good for.
Okay.
Good for
So you said Tampa, right, Jen? Right? I know you're waffling like Brett Favre, but you say Tampa, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good enough. Okay, we'll leave it there. We'll freeze the tape there. All right, Jeremy.
Well, there's one guy that's never had a true number one wide receiver since he's been a quarterback, and he's won an MVP, and Odell has actually visited there during his rehab. It's Baltimore Ravens. Other.
So you're on Baltimore. Well, I know Candy Ebling would love to see Green Bay, and rightfully so, because Devontae Adams left. I don't know why. For some reason, I think the LA Rams really need him worse than anybody, and they help rebuild his image a little bit. So I would really say the Rams. And to me, it's not a very comfortable pick. But when you've established a chemistry with Matthew Stafford and you won a Super Bowl, why not try to go back there again? The only thing that actually the Rams are missing is Von Miller. So I'll actually go with the LA Rams. So other topics to get to, I figured we can go ahead and slip that one in as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate this year's 0-2 teams. The Tennessee Titans started that way. They're 2 up, 2 down. Cincinnati Bengals 2-2. The Las Vegas Raiders are 1-3. And the Carolina Panthers, yes, Jennifer, are 1-3. And the main thing is and then we'll go back last season. 7 teams started 0-2. None of them made the playoffs. So what you have here. So we're going to go back again over the list. Tennessee 2 up, 2 down. Cincinnati 2-2. The Raiders 1-3. Carolina Panthers 1-3, and the Atlanta Falcons 2-2. Of these teams, which one stands a better chance to make the playoffs of any of them?
Bengals.
Who are you asking?
I'm going to ask you, Jennifer. We'll start off with you.
Oh.
Phil Jones, you better love me for this one, and I hope it's true. But I'm going to go with the Raiders.
Are you? Okay. All right, Jeremy.
I'm going to say the Bengals. They have the most complete roster out of everybody on that list.
Very good. Okay, Mel?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Bengals as well. I'm going to go with the Bengals.
Steve?
I was going to say the Bengals, but since everyone's picking them, I'll say the Titans just because the division that they're in, I think they can, if they get their act together, and it seems like they're starting to, I think they can win that division.
And believe it or not, I'll jump on the horn and go with the Bengals too. I love Joe Burrow, and more importantly, he has some offensive line help around him, and it's pretty hard to go against Jamar Chase. So I'll go with the Bengals, and that's that. Now, let's talk about the fact that it's amazing that you had 7 teams last year start 0-2. None of them made the playoffs. Is there any merit to that, Steve? Starting 0-2?
No, I mean, obviously you're digging yourself into an early hole, but no, because if you turn it on and start playing really good football, then it's early enough in the season where you can turn things around. I remember a couple of years, well, it was more than a couple of years ago now, Dallas started 0-2 and won the Super Bowl.
Right. Well, I think what helps is the fact that you got 17 games too. So if you lose an extra one, then that helps it a little bit. All right, I'm turning over to Mel. Go ahead.
That was when Emmitt Smith was holding out, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Does it matter? Yeah, going 0-2. I mean, psychologically, you're digging yourself a hole. I mean, all these guys get paid. I mean, they're all getting paid. None of these guys are out here for charity, and everybody's trying to earn their paycheck week in and week out. And when you dig yourself an 0-2 hole, it's very difficult to get out of it. Now, can you? Yeah, I mean, like we talked about the Cowboys, they just had superior talent. I mean, they were just much better than everybody at that particular time. and they were able to, they had a dominant running game. They had a dominant quarterback. They had a dominant defense. They had a true number 1 wide receiver, and they had a number 2 wide receiver. I mean, they were just a very good football team from top to bottom. Are any of these teams that any of the teams that we're talking about like the Cowboys? No, not at all. So when you start out 0-2, it's an uphill climb from there.
Jeremy, anything you want to add to this?
121 times in the Super Bowl era, teams have started 0-2. Only 12 have made the playoffs. 1 has made a Super Bowl.
Good enough for me. Quit while you're ahead. Good number. Jennifer?
I kind of look at it a little differently. Mel, Steve, all y'all can correct me. But especially with this 17 regular season stretch, I think the 5-game preseason back in the day was imperative, because preseason has changed a lot, even in my lifetime. I kind of look at the first game or two as the starters kind of preseason games. Like, I know that's bad, especially when you need to work out those kinks. But it's bad because it does also psychologically affect the players, right? So, like, I think that the main reason we beat the Saints was because of that fight they got into with the Bucs. I really think that played a psychological mindset. I think the same thing happened with the Bucs. Also, they lost Evans. But that's how I see it. So I think it's possible. But that's just a chick who loves football's opinion.
All right. The only thing I'll do to close out the topic here is I predict down the road you're going to have an 18-game schedule anyways. I remember the original USFL had 18 games with no preseason, and the Canadian Football League has 18. So to me, I think while it is 0-2 is a bit of a number that you judge by, and Jeremy brought it up, I think the more games you add, the less significance it'll have as time goes on. But it was good to get the different opinions on this whole thing nonetheless. And it's safe to say 3 of us got the Bengals, and Steve was ready to go that route before he opted to go with the Titans. But it's pretty interesting. I like what the Bengals are doing.
I didn't say Bengals.
Pardon me?
I said Raiders.
Oh, you said Raiders. Well, 3 of us got the Bengals, right?
Yep.
We have a Raider. All right, whatever. We got a Raider.
Sorry.
And we have a Titan. It doesn't matter, Jennifer. It is what it is. No, but the reality of the situation is, I think in the Bengals case, it was a matter of acclimating to the new offensive line that they bought during the offseason and making sure you keep Joe Burrow on his feet so he can go to his playmakers and Joe Mixon with away. So, no. Hey, listen, you know what, Jen? I got news for you. The Raiders are an intriguing option because you got Josh McDaniels, if he can get things figured out with Derek Carr and Devontae Adams. I could see it, but they have to get out of their own way first in order to pull it off and acclimate themselves. Pardon me?
I said ding, 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 ding. Absolutely.
Right.
Because Carr and Adams in college were the dynamic duo.
Right.
So, I mean, like this year, joy on both of their faces to be reunited during minicamp.
Right.
Or like when the first pictures came out of them being reunited on the field. That was just heartwarming. I'm not going to lie. That was just heartwarming. That was 2 guys who genuinely love each other. Like,
so here's what we got the Raiders. Okay. 1 of 2 things can happen. And I'm not getting into a singing contest because if you had a Memorex, you'd probably break the darn glass anyway. Reunited, it feels so good, or the dynamic dingbats, whatever one you have. So we got the dynamic dingbats because I had the 2 D's connected, or reunited, it feels so good. Will it? Time will tell. TBD.
Roll that Peaches and Herb tape.
Yeah. Get used a little bit by the end of this show. All right. Guess what, folks? Thursday night football game. Indianapolis Colts 1-2-1. Boy, that tie is crazy, isn't it? Denver Broncos 2-2. Jonathan Taylor is out. Jeremy, give us your thoughts of this football game.
Well, not only is Jonathan Taylor out, don't forget they lost the bowling ball with legs for the Broncos, Javonte Williams. They also lost 70% of their pass rush with Randy Gregory having to get knee surgery. That being said, Gene Walczek over here says it best. Broncos country, let's cry.
By the way, Gene, enjoyed working with you earlier today. Looking forward to connecting with you later on. Thanks for coming in there, Gene. Appreciate you very much, big guy. And maybe one of these times, Gene, you'll be able to come on this panel with us as well. Look forward to the day that you can match wits ends with you, even though I had a good time with you on the morning show earlier. So, yeah, okay, go ahead. Say what you said again, Jeremy.
Well, they lost Javonte Williams. The Broncos did. He's out for the season with an ACL and an LCL. And then you've got Randy Gregory just had to have his meniscus cleaned up in his knee. So he's out anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. That's 70% of their pass rush. That's huge because Matt Ryan has not done well under pressure. You take away the 19 pressures he's had on quarterbacks over the last 4 games. The Broncos defense might be in trouble because the Colts have a good O-line.
Jennifer, some thoughts.
I'm conflated on this one because Matt hasn't been fitting into the scheme that well in Indianapolis. Like, true story. He's not been, I don't know, it's not gelling yet. Maybe it's still, knocking off all the cobwebs, getting used to everything. I think Russell's starting to take control in Denver. So for tonight, I'm going to go with Denver.
Well, Gene Walchek's on a roll. Toilet bowl tonight. Of course, I don't think they sanctioned it by the NCAA. Colts already punted 3 times with 3 minutes left in the first quarter. Thanks for the crack updates. Gene, I actually thought this would be a 16-13 score anyway, so it's not like you're seeing a real offensive explosion. Thanks very much.
I think it's going to be 6-8.
Right. Mel, what do you think about this toilet bowl, as Gene Walchek says?
Is he muted?
I don't know. Do you mute yourself, Mel? There you go. I don't know. Sooner or later.
Can't hear a word.
Get back. Okay. All right, Mel. Sure, he'll figure it out in the tropics. Okay. But meanwhile, we'll let Steve go ahead and chime in, and then Mel will go ahead and get his audio situation straightened out. So
Unmute yourself, Mel.
Unmute yourself, Mel. There you go. I know you'll figure it out. Attaboy, Mel. Give us your take about your old team.
I don't know how that happened.
I don't either.
You got 2 teams that desperately need a win in Denver and Indianapolis, and I know the folks in Denver want to start seeing this contract start to pay dividends. But you have to understand these are 2 guys. You got 2 quarterbacks that are with 2 different teams, and they're learning another language. It's like knowing English and then having to learn Mandarin. So what they need to do is pare down the playbook. Instead of trying to show everybody how smart they are with all the different plays and the formations and the motions and all the different checks that they have. Hey, man, let's do 10 things real good. Okay, let's figure out what we do. What 10, 20 plays do we do real well and that we can execute and dominate a defense with. That's what they need to do. I mean, all teams have a bunch of plays. Even when we're with the Rams, we had a bunch of plays, but really come game day, you're only running about 10, 15, maybe 20 plays max. And running plays, it's 5 or 6. Toss right, toss left. That's what it was. John Robinson, student body right, student body left. Gap right, gap left. It was ISO. It's just a matter of, was our will greater than our opponent's will? So they got to scale back these playbooks. Give these guys an opportunity to play fast and loose, and then we can see what they can do. But I know the folks in Denver are getting a little anxious right now. They want to see this big old contract start to pay dividends.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
you were so right about that, Mel. All right, Steve,
Mel, drop the mic. Just drop the mic. There you go. Because that was it. I mean, you have to. These guys have played for their respective teams their prior for like a decade plus, and so they know that system. And you're throwing them in a new system, and fans say, "Well, they're paying this guy $10 million. We want to see him throw 5 touchdowns week 1." It doesn't work that way.
No, that's true.
And look at, because I hear the argument all the time. Well, Brady won a Super Bowl the first year at Tampa. Well, 2 things. One, Tampa was stacked,
right,
and the other, they struggled early in the year, and then they started implementing some of the Patriots plays in that playbook, and then Brady found his comfort level, and but that was a stacked team, and this is the nature of the beast. It doesn't happen overnight. That being said, for tonight's game, I mean, both teams combined have only scored, I think, 30.8 points per game combined. I think Denver's like 16 and the Colts are 14. So, they're both struggling offensively. But I like Denver because, one, they're at home, they're in the thin air, and it's a short week.
Right.
So, when you add in that travel, I always tend to go with the home teams in these Thursday night games. And I think Denver will prevail tonight. But, Russell Wilson, his shoulder's been bothering him. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Well, the thing is number one, you have to get Russell Wilson in space. That's where you cater to. Number two, you've got two teams with new toys called quarterbacks, Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson. Expectations going into the year were high on them. I know the Colts dumped Carson Wentz, and of course, after the Jacksonville game, we all saw that Matt Ryan didn't do any better either, and it only got worse. But my point is this: Mel's right. Pare the playbook down. But you got two teams with two new toys to see which one will outperform. Now, the intangible here about tonight's game is the fact that the Colts are 1-2-1 with the tie. And then you wonder where that'll play into things down the road, where the Broncos are 2-2, and they're winning ugly to stay in contention in the division. So to me, when you look at all the different variables, of course, injuries are taking a toll on the running backs for both sides, Taylor, and then, of course, Jeremy talked about the other injuries. So it's a 16-13 game. In my opinion, I'd favor the Broncos on it. And this is one of those games that we probably all wish it were flexed to Sunday so we could see something better. But, let's face it, they schedule these games way out in advance. And, if you can't find Amazon Prime, then you're probably glad you didn't if you have to watch this one. Anyways, and I don't know. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So my friend just messaged that Hines just tackled and then couldn't stand up on his own after that tackle.
Oh,
Hines.
Needham, the running back for the Colts.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
that's not good. Not only that, you got to also look at Matt Ryan struggling because he's only got one valid receiver on that roster, and Michael Pittman. The rest of them probably don't make a roster on most other teams because they don't have anybody.
Then what I would suggest at that point? Bring back T.Y. Hilton. He's pretty good.
Exactly. They never should have let him go.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a mystery for a different show. But if he's that depleted with his wide receiving corps, give T.Y. Hilton the call. He'd love to continue playing for the Colts with a pretty decent quarterback. Why he's out there is anybody's guess. So anybody else with any closing thoughts on this particular game at all? I'll go around the horn again. Jeremy, closing thoughts on this game tonight?
Like I said, I think the final score might be 6-8. If smart bet would be take the under and not pick a team.
All right, but you're saying 8-6, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean 6-8, 8-6. I don't know.
Score 6-8, so we'll just say 8-6, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, fine.
Okay, no problem. Just kidding with you, busting your chops. Okay, Jen, any closing thoughts on this particular sleep it?
Who'd you ask?
Yeah.
Jen.
Did you ask me?
any
Not really.
Okay.
Honestly, like the Broncos have been kind of disappointing, but it was to be expected.
Mel?
I think they'll do better for it.
I think they can take a lot of pressure off these quarterbacks if they establish a running game. Now I know both teams are down a running back, but Russell Wilson became Russell Wilson because they had a good running game, and I think people lose sight of that. They got Matt Ryan when he won the MVP. Down here in Atlanta, when Shanahan was a coach, they ran the football very, very well. Matt Ryan is plays very good complementary football when you have a good, strong running game. Same thing with Russell Wilson. Have a good, strong running game, play some defense, maybe play a little bit above your head on the defensive side of the ball, do whatever you got to do, but help these guys out by running the football.
Steve, closing thoughts on the game. I got a couple more.
I just think I think the Broncos are going to take this one. I think, they're at home. That's a tough place to win on the road, even with the team that's struggling offensively. I think they find a way to get it done.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, you know what? There's no way I could not have this game on with Mr. Patricia here on set. And Patricia made his name by being active in the chat room because of Patricia. And if people want to know what I'm talking about, the Lions are at the Patriots. Both teams are 1-3. And before I get to that, though, I do want to pass out our condolences to the Venice family. Rest in peace, Jerry Venice. He died today at the age of 80. He had a great career with the Bears, and he worked for the Detroit Lions when they won their last playoff game versus the Dallas Cowboys under his watch. And I've always said the biggest mistake the Lions ever made was they didn't give Jerry Venice the general manager job, since he did some good things with the Bears as well as some of his other stops. With that said, okay, 1-3. Jeremy, size up the Lions versus the offensive list coordinators of the New England Patriots.
Oh, he's offensive.
Yeah, Matt Patricia is offensive. He's offensive to Lions fans, and he's slowly becoming more offensive to Pats fans, because Mac Jones was probably the best pro-ready quarterback last year coming out, but he wasn't the best quarterback coming out of college. There's a big difference there. You know, our buddy Dom DeRubis says it best. Mac Jones's ceiling is so low he has to duck to walk in the room. But that being said, with him being injured, he has been at practice. They haven't given a designation yet. He still is questionable. I hate the fact they took away doubtful or probable as a designation for a questionable player, because that tells you everything you need to know. If they're doubtful, more than likely you can count on them being out. If it's the Bailey Zappi show, I'm a little scared, because look what we did with Geno Smith. We made him look like Joe Montana.
Yeah, well, I can tell you right now, Bailey Zappi was a heck of a quarterback at Western Kentucky.
I understand. I'm just saying, we made Geno Smith look like Joe Montana.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bailey Zappi, before it's all said and done, may wind up being the hidden gem of the group, and maybe one of the best quarterbacks out of that quarterback class.
I understand.
I saw what he did at Western Kentucky. They played in Conference USA against Florida Atlantic, and I also saw what he did in the bowl game. So Bailey Zappi, to me, could very well be one of the best quarterbacks in the draft. And with that said, I'm going to turn over to Steve Ballesteri and go diagonal with this thing, because you know what? Bill Belichick may struggle at times with his draft choice, top of the draft, but boy, he doesn't struggle later on in the game. So what are your thoughts, first of all, Steve, about Bailey Zappi? Let's forget about Jones.
Well, you know, I thought, with Mac Jones out last week, they were going with, Brian Hoyer, who's probably 1,000 years old. So I was feeling a little less optimistic with Hoyer in there, especially up in Lambeau going against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. But then he got hurt the second offensive series, and they brought in Zappi. I thought he acquitted himself really well. Now, as Bill Parcells used to say, don't put him in Canton quite yet. And,
right.
They limited the offense. They simplified it, like Mel was saying earlier. They found about 5 good plays that he does well, and that's what they ran with. And I agreed with that until it got to overtime. And I thought the coaches did him a dirty, because, at the end of regulation, they stopped Aaron Rodgers. Green Bay got the ball. They stopped him again. They punted, and rookie Marcus Jones ran it back 20 yards to midfield. Okay, that's the time that you throw caution to the wind and say to the kid, just get us a first down. We're in field goal range. We're not asking you to, lead us 10-play drive, airing it out. Just one first down. Let them do that. They played not to lose, and that's exactly what they did. But I thought Zappi played well. He had 107 quarterback rating, but, sometimes those things can be misleading. He a couple of times he made rookie mistakes. He held on to the ball too long, but he sees the field well for a rookie. That was one of the things all through training camp and preseason that we saw time and again. He sees the field really well, and he has a good chemistry with a couple of the receivers that he worked with that were lower on the depth chart, which is always a good thing,
right.
And we'll see how it works out. But I don't think there's a quarterback controversy at all in New England. I think that as soon as Jones is healthy, he'll be back in there.
Well, the
I
thing
agree.
about Zappy, even if he isn't, there is no quarterback controversy. You get the guy in the middle rounds, you could get trade value for him if you ever decide to trade for him. You're talking about a middle round pick that can net you value down the line, although right now they need to have him. But
Yeah.
I'm with you all the way. But again, you talk about value. You go ahead and get yourself a heck of a player in the middle of the draft. And if you can net it a second or a first round pick out of him down the road, not a bad investment. I remember when with Washington, they drafted RG3, I think it was, I believe. And then they brought in Kirk Cousins. Well, my goodness, Kirk Cousins would end up outlasting RG3 because he got hurt. So, are we looking at history repeat itself? I don't know. Not even talk about that tonight. But I tell you what, Bailey Zappi got nearly 6,000 yards with Western Kentucky and over 14,000 yards in college. So this guy was a good pick. All right, Jennifer, give me some quick thoughts about the Patriots and the Lions, a team that you really have endorsed as what's why I'm letting Mel go last.
You know what? I'm doing you Lions fans a favor, and I'm going to make myself a little sick. No offense, Steve. I like Zappy. Like I saw some of his preseason and his training camps. Obviously, Panthers, Patriots, mixed training. I was impressed. I was a little jelly. I'm not going to lie. I don't get jealous of the Patriots a lot, but I really, really like him. So I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry, Jeremy, Scott, Mel, you were right at the beginning of the year. I'm going to go with the Patriots on this one because A, you're at home. B, Zappy's got something to play for because let's not forget, at your regular job, every day is an audition for an interview for a promotion or something else, right? You're on the national screen like this every day, every practice, every off-field workout is an audition for another team. So I like Zappy, and especially if they bring up some of the wide receivers that he was doing well with during training camp and let them play together, because I don't understand why coaches don't do that. Like, if you have good chemistry, let's see what happens. I mean, especially if you're 1-3. Matt Rule, I'm talking to you. But
don't worry, I have a little thing about Matt Rule we'll say for a little bit later, but keep going.
He just makes me sad. That's all I can say. But I really like Zappy. And plus, I like saying his name. It's very appropriate for a quarterback.
He zapped that ball in there.
That's it.
I mean, can you guys think of a more appropriate name for a quarterback? Really?
Back in 2005, there was a kid out of Purdue that
ended up with it. So, all right. Well, I'll tell you what, Mel, what do you have for Jennifer about Zappy and what we can see? In fact, you know what I'm going to do before I get to Mel? I'm going to have everybody just simply make a prediction for the game, and then Mel, you can make a prediction and then some. All right. So what I want out of everyone, Jeremy, give me your prediction on the Lions and the Patriots.
I don't know if the Patriots can score that much, but this defense could possibly give it to them. But I still say the Lions keep their high-scoring offense going because Shark is actually back, and he's been good at drawing people off the people underneath. That's what he's doing, is he's been garnering a double and triple team at times, which has left TJ Hockenson open, which prior to the last game, he wasn't catching the ball. You also had Amon-Ra, who may or may not play. It's still up in the air. Then you've got Quintez Cephas, who is not playing because he rolled his ankle last week. And Swift is out, but Jamal Williams did great in his stead. We run the ball well. That's the one thing you can say is that right now, Detroit has not only the number one scoring offense, they also have the number one offensive yardage offense. And I don't know if that backfield for New England is going to be able to stop them from getting the yards. I think it's going to be something like 32-24. Lions win.
32-24 Lions. All right, Jennifer, give me a prediction score. That's what I'm looking for.
I really stink at that. I'm not gonna lie, I stink at predicting scores. 28-21 Patriots.
Okay, fair enough. Steve?
Well, a big thing for New England this week is their defense, obviously, because the Lions have been just rolling up the scores every week, and they have to get some stops or turnovers in this game. And if Jalen Mills is able to play this week, they have a much better chance. Now, the one thing I will say, I hope after last week in Green Bay, Jack Jones gets elevated to that third corner spot. I know he was last week because of the injury to Mills, but if for any reason the coaches decide to go with Miles Bryant in the slot, if I'm Detroit, I look for 27 in blue all game long, because whoever they go to, facing him, they're going to be open.
Will Harris, you're talking about, right?
No, I'm talking about Miles Bryant for the Patriots.
Oh, okay.
If I'm Detroit, you're the Patriots. Oh no, the Patriots are wearing red this week. That's right.
Yeah.
They're going back to their throwbacks. So let me rephrase that. If I'm Detroit, I'm looking for the red jersey wearing number 27, and that's where I'm going. That's what Aaron Rodgers did a lot last week. So, but that being said, New England's running game is really good as well. They have two running backs that can, really get after it. They've been, I think they ran for 169 yards last week. So they have a good running game as well. I think with at home, and Detroit's defense has been struggling, I'm going to drink the Belichick Kool-Aid and say 30-28 New England.
All right, Mal, now you can come up with a score and then some. Now that everybody's gotten that out of the way, size up the Patriots and the Lions.
I think this week is, there's been some rumblings about Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, and I think, this could be a big week for him personally if Detroit can't stop anybody, because that's been their problem. I mean, I was watching the game last week, and I just couldn't believe it. I stopped watching it, and the next thing I know, they're back in it. I'm like, man, how did this happen? What are they doing? And they can put up points with anybody, but they can't stop anybody. And that's a big problem. Now, this is a week, if you're Aaron Glenn, I mean, you really got to look at yourself in the mirror. You're talking about a third-string quarterback that you're going to be playing against, and a team that only scores about 16 points a game. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better scenario for a head coach whose defense, a defensive coordinator whose defense is struggling. You couldn't ask for a better situation to try to get some confidence for yourself, obviously, and build some confidence for your defense. So I see Detroit winning this game. I see them putting up about 35, and they'll hold New England to 14. I don't know much about the quarterback, Zap. I do vaguely remember hearing his name for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I don't know a whole lot about him. I didn't see him play last week, so I don't have a lot to add there.
There was an article about Zappy that came out just before the draft, and he said the best quarterback not named Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I could see that, and I was on the media distribution list for Western Kentucky. The numbers I saw, I was putting them up all over Twitter. I think I even shared some of them with you, Steve, too, with some of the prospects.
Yeah, they threw 62 touchdowns last year in Kentucky.
That's a lot. I'll give you guys a quick prediction. There's a couple other things I want to touch base on as well. I'll give Detroit to not 33-28. I know better than to think they could win by more than 10 anyway. So we'll go 33-28. It's interesting to see Dan Campbell against Matt Patricia / Joe Judge. I think that'll be the most interesting thing there. We know that Dan Campbell can match anybody for one-liners, but he needs to start winning games instead of being a great quote machine. But, again, to me, the Lions have got to find a way to discover any kind of defense, because the last thing they want to do, being in every single close game all the time, is continue to lose them, because then the microscope gets bigger and bigger. But the fact is, I still have a hard time fathoming Joe Judge and Matt Patricia being dual offensive coordinators.
It's the stupidest thing in the world. I mean,
it really is.
You're stunting the development of your quarterback, and you said, I like Mac Jones coming out of Alabama. The guy's very, very smart. I think he's like a 5.0 student or whatever, 4-point-something student. But he's a smart kid, man, and they're just stunting this guy's growth. I mean, this year is a waste for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
on the defensive side of the ball, I do know that we elevated Demetrius Taylor to play DN, which thank God he's probably replacing Michael Brockers, who's been a bump on the log on that defense, doesn't eat up blocks and doesn't help anybody. They're moving Hutchinson to outside linebacker, and Josh Pascal and Jerry Jacobs has returned to practice as of today.
Well, in all the transcripts I'm getting in, the information is they definitely have to start working on the scheme before they start making the change with the coaching. So we'll see how a lot of this plays out.
Lane or Joe Schmidt coming back, because I mean they need a lot of help.
Yeah, no,
I know we need a lot of help. I said the weakest positions on this defense was safety and linebacker, and it showed.
It's not just linebacker. I mean, I think it's schematically the guys.
Oh yeah,
it's something. I mean, guys aren't just open; they're wide open.
Right. The problem that I see, and I'm going to go back to last year. Last year, we ran a 3-4 under. And this offseason, it started off with him saying, we're going to run more 4-man fronts because of the personnel we have. And I was good with that. Now, all of a sudden, we changed to a 4-2-5 attacking defense is what he's called it. Well, there hasn't been much attacking because all we've had is Hutch getting pressure. It doesn't always equal sacks. As we all know, pressures don't always equal sacks, but it does change some things. But when the pressure is only coming from one side, if the quarterback's at least moderately athletic, all he's got to do is run the other way, which is what we've seen.
So you're saying Hutchinson's going to play linebacker. So what, is this going to take his hand off the dirt?
Yep, they're going to do what they did with him at Michigan, take his hand out the dirt and move him to where he was more effective at outside linebacker.
But I mean, are they changing? Are they going to be a 3-man front or a 4-man front?
Well, they elevated Demetrius Taylor. Austin, who's actually played D end as well as D tackle. They probably are going to be giving more snaps to Austin Bryant as well, who can play D end and D tackle. We got Isaiah Buggs and Aleem McNeil. I don't know if they're going to run more 4. I hope they go back to the 3-4 because it took that team 13 weeks to learn that defense with that young roster. You keep 65% of the roster when you switch over to the new year and go with the new scheme. It made no sense to me.
Well, the guy that Scott was talking about, they say he invented the 4-3 defense, right? The linebacker for Chicago. I mean, they used to be a 5-man front, and he would just, on his own, back up from the center and go and drop back in pass coverage. And they said usually it ended up in an interception. He was a big guy.
Talking about Mark DeLeon, the one that we had for the coach last year?
No, maybe that's not who I'm. No, that might not be. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm sorry.
Are you talking about the current linebacker coach, Kelvin Shepard?
No, somebody just passed away that was a linebacker for the Bears. I'm sorry. His name was
you're not talking about Doug Plank, are you?
His last name was George. I can't remember his first name.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'd have to look it up because I don't remember right off the top of my head.
Too much stuff.
We lost Jennifer for a moment. She lost her internet. One thing I want to mention about Jerry Venice, I don't know if I mentioned it at all, because he's the one guy that I had so much respect for, is he was actually 47-17 with the Bears when he was running the show. And here's a guy to me. Yeah, that's unbelievable. And, the Lions had him in the front office, but I remember.
And let him go.
Yeah, they do. And I believe Chuck Schmidt was the one that took over for him as well. But you want to talk about losing guys. You can't afford to lose those types of people there as well. So I know there are a couple things I want to get to. Whether she's able to make it or not will depend on the internet. But came up with something very interesting over the last couple of days that Blake Bortles actually announced his retirement. And what's so interesting about Blake Bortles is this. I'm going to go over some information. Every quarterback in NFL history with a season of 4,000 pass yards and 35 touchdowns within their first 2 seasons in the NFL. But get this with the company with Bortles, okay? Dan Marino, Kurt Warner, Blake Bortles, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert. Now, what's interesting about Bortles is he's 24-49 with the Jaguars, 103 touchdowns and 75 interceptions, 17,646 yards, and he ranks second behind Mark Brunell. Interesting. Steve, you ought to know a little bit. I happen to watch the Jaguars beat the Buffalo Bills 10-3. They had a pretty good defense, and they were winning, but you actually had to face Bortles, in the championship game. Here's a guy, I won't classify him as a bust. He's won at least a couple playoff games anyhow. I won't, obviously his numbers are what they are to play for the Jaguars. But give me your thoughts about Blake Bortles, Steve.
I was never a big fan of his. Now, that being said, that AFC championship game for 3.5 quarters, he was very, very good against the Patriots. And they were up by 10 points in the fourth quarter. And then New England started coming back, and then he threw that short pass at the end that was knocked away. But, I was never, when I looked at that Jaguars team that year, I thought they were primed to go maybe even win a Super Bowl if they had a better quarterback. I was never a big fan of his.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all right. Appreciate the opinion. What are your thoughts, Mel, about Blake Bortles?
I think, and I don't know, it seemed like he started out pretty good, and then he seemed like he lost some confidence. And I don't know if that coincided with Tom Coughlin going upstairs and Doug Marrone taking over. I don't know exactly when that took place.
Right.
But, like you're talking about that game. Jacksonville, man, they would hit you in the mouth. They were a very physical football team.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like they came back the next year, something happened with him. The next year he just wasn't the same guy anymore. And a lot of guys were disgruntled with the way some of the things were going in the front office. Everybody wanted to get out of there for some reason.
Well, you got to remember, Nathaniel Hackett was his offensive coordinator. He got run out of there. And there was a culture issue with Tom Coughlin as well. And that's why he subsequently got fired by Shad Khan. So I've met him a couple times. Tom Coughlin obviously did good work with the Giants. And, of course, he was the first coach of the Jaguars, took them to an AFC championship game. But I think Tom Coughlin's cultural ways of not adjusting to today's players led to what I'm doing in Jacksonville. I do. And Blake Bortles, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think Blake Bortles is a great quarterback, but he played for a bad team that had a good defense, and he was a game manager is really what he was. Remember, Leonard Fournette played there, and he got run out of town, and he got himself a championship ring with the Buccaneers. So, and I've covered
Ramsey, you got Jalen Ramsey was there.
Yeah, you ran him out of town, got a decent draft all there. The culture in Jacksonville was bad. And I've covered that team the last several years. I don't know if I'm going to get there this year. I'm not. I hope I can. But, I've seen a whole lot worse on NFL fields than Blake Bortles. That's for sure. Any thoughts about that, Jeremy?
Blake Bortles was a serviceable game manager, but as you said, he was on a bad roster with bad coaching, and it made it rough on him. He had the great first couple of years, and then all of a sudden the downward trod started. And that had to do with he had nobody to throw to. He didn't have much of a running game, and that makes it hard on a game manager quarterback. Game manager quarterback needs the elite defense and a good running game.
So many guys there's so much dysfunction at that particular time too.
Right. And then you had the one offensive lineman doing full page ads about how bad he thought their general manager was at the time and all that stuff.
David Caldwell, you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
He had lots of opportunities to get it straight. Gus Bradley paved way over to Doug Marrone. Let's talk about that coaching instability. They definitely had it there. So, yeah, I saw it firsthand. It is what it is. So, but it's hard to believe, though, that when I look at Bortles as a whole, that he can actually be on a list like that. I want to repeat this because it's just such an interesting fact there that every quarterback in NFL history with a season of 4,000 yards and 35 TDs within their first 2 seasons. And Bortles is in the same sentence, of Dan Marino, Kurt Warner, Patrick Mahomes, and Justin Herbert. That says an awful lot. So I just thought I'd point that out. I think it was something interesting that came across and wanted to bring up Blake. So with that said, I don't know if Jennifer's going to make it back or not. She did a good job while she was on here. So why don't we go ahead and go to our parting shots. Jeremy, lead off.
Well, I just enjoy talking football. I love it. I don't care if it's against an opponent that's coming up for the Lions this week. I can care less who's with me. Talking football is just something I love to do. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
My pleasure. All right, Mel, some parting shots about what's taken place over the last week or whatever you want to get off your chest.
Well, the Grim Reaper struck again last week in college football. Another couple coaches bit the dust. My teammate Carl Durrell at Colorado, he got his walking papers. They're going to pay him, I think, $11 million. I think it was 8 million, 8 million, something like that. And then the coach of Wisconsin lost his job. I think they're giving him $11 million to walk away. And again, it goes back. I think the coach of Wisconsin, has done a great job there.
Paul Chris, yeah.
I mean, you just can't. You're going to have some years, but as long as the team, you might have some downs, but as long as you continue to go up, what are we doing here? Now, I know they're real high on the defensive coordinator who I think used to play at Wisconsin and played, a number of years in the NFL. But again, it's more than just about winning football games. It's about the kind of men that you're developing and creating. And so, it's very difficult to go into people's homes, a student athlete's home, and say, "Hey, I'm gonna be there. Be there with you every step of the way. I'm gonna be there with your son every step of the way. You can trust me. I'm gonna be there with him." And 2 years, you're gone.
Right. Yeah,
Saying Carl Durrell a couple years ago. He was a Pac-12 Coach of the Year the first year he got there. That pandemic shortened year. So it takes time, and we're in this microwave generation where we want everything overnight. It's not going to happen every night. And there's 100 and some odd D1 schools. Not all of them are going to compete for championships. You have to understand who you are and what you are, and have realistic expectations. Not every team's going to compete for a national championship. Let's make it about the student experience, developing great young men, what kind of leaders we put out in this world, and be a lot more and be fair to some of these guys. Because I really don't think that Paul Chris, he's going to go somewhere. I think he's going to do fine. But I think he was a heck of a football coach doing what he did at Wisconsin. He just kind of took over for I forgot who was there before him, but just kind of continued. They run the football well, and they throw the ball when they need to.
All right, Steve.
Well, it's just after the events here last week, it kind of puts things in perspective, and we had such a bad hurricane down here, and so many people lost everything, and just amazingly, Sunday we get our power back. The TV comes on, and I'm able to watch the NFL just in time for the football game, and it kind of puts things, how blessed we are about certain things. And like I said, we were very lucky here. I have no complaints, but I feel bad for everyone around us that lost everything. A lot of people lost their lives in this storm, and hats off to all the people who are first responders and go into harm's way to try to rescue people. And that was the one good thing I saw about this. All our neighbors I live on a circle. Everyone came together, helped each other out. And that's the good part of the American way. And now it isn't always that way. And we all know there aren't always great people out there, but to see everyone come together in a time of emergency was very nice to see. And it was heartwarming,
Living in the state of Florida, I've had hurricane issues on our side of the state. At our community, a lot of people in our gated community come by and rally around, help get shutters up, and that's true. I give you a lot there. All right, I want to just mention a couple of quick things. First of all, if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, okay, they are 1-26 under Matt Rule when they allow 17 plus points. Words of advice, Carolina Panther fans: don't allow 17 or more points. We're going to lose again, and Matt Rule gets closer to college, okay, and he gets run out of the Piedmont. Item number 2, I want to expand on what Mel said, okay? Great point. You hate to see all these knee-jerk reactions to college just turning over, but here's what's going to happen. You're going to see more Frank Soliches do what they did. They're going to leave a place like Nebraska. You're going to go to a place like Ohio University or a smaller school, and you're going to be legendary at those. So you're a big fish going to a smaller pond, and they'll treat you a whole lot better. And I think that's really what it comes down to. I don't like where college football is going from a coaching standpoint. Everybody's looking for instant gratification. No, I'm with you all the way. There's a lot of good qualified coaches that are not coaching anymore, but Clay Helton landed, and a lot of other guys will land, and they'll follow suit as well. So I'm glad you continue, Mel, week in and week out to bring up that, because I think it's something that should be looked upon a little bit more. And I'm glad that you brought it up again. So there's no question Paul Chryst will land somewhere else. And you know what? The microscope won't be as big. I think part of Wisconsin's logic, though, is they had Jim Leonard and they are giving him a chance to audition for that job. He's a highly coveted coach anyhow. We'll see where that plays out. So I don't know. I wasn't on fire at Wisconsin. I left it to Candy Ebling and Eric Katz this week to talk about it, Rick Hurdy to talk about it.
You know what they say? You can't love the one you want. Love the one you're with.
Right. Well, yeah, good luck in this day and age.
Unfortunately, Michigan does it too much.
Right. So, all right, well, let me go over some other promotional stuff. I have an opportunity to let everybody know where they can be reached, okay? And then we'll call it a night. Been a great show. Jennifer, great job while you're on. Jeremy, as always, love having you on. Steve, you know how I feel about you. Mel, you know how I feel. When people come on this show, this is a fraternity, man. That's how I treat it. It's a brotherhood, and we have a little sister here that comes on every week, too. So, you know, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to let Jeremy let everybody know how you get a hold of you first.
All right. You can follow me on YouTube at Kneecap Biting with Smoking Jeremy B. You can also follow me at Smoking Jeremy B on Twitter. And you can also follow me on my Facebook page for Lions fans. That is the Motor City Kneecap Biters.
All right, Steve.
I love that. Kneecap Biters. Oh, by the way, Jeremy, just real quick, I was getting ready to start a Patriots podcast, and I told one of my co-hosts how you relate to Matt Patricia as Matt Patricia just before we went on, and he spit coffee all over the screen.
Oh, he loved it, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was cracking up. He had just taken a sip of coffee, and I said, "Yeah, I was talking with the Lions guy, and he called Matty P Matt Patricia." And
yeah,
he spit coffee everywhere.
Yeah, and that's why Jeremy got his butt on this broadcast, because we needed his sense of humor, and I couldn't type fast enough. All right, Steve.
Yeah, you can find me on.
In fact, you know what, Steve? Before you do that, I'll go ahead and get ours in since longer. Subscribe to South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel, or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion I got me thinking about that, Matt Patricia. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you have a hard time finding it through the website, you can go ahead and go to youtube.com, look for South Florida Tribune, subscribe that way. Also, special shout out to Candy Ebling, does an outstanding job with the website. And if you want to reach us via email, do so at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Folks, just, you know, we are human beings. We do have the ability to laugh at ourselves, at one another. It doesn't make a lick of difference, especially when you got a guy talking about Matt Patricia. All right, Steve, go ahead.
You can find me on Twitter at SteveB7SFG. I write for PatsFans.com. I do a podcast with them called Patriots 4th and 2. I also do another Patriot podcast called One Patriot Place. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, you know, all the other social medias at Steve Bellister.
And I feel very fortunate. I had an opportunity to go on one of your shows previewing the Dolphins. So please send my
regards. Had Jeremy on this week.
Yeah, please send my regards to Claire. She's a sweetheart. All right, Mel, go ahead.
Yeah, you can find me on all the social media at Mel Farr Jr. And you can find out what we have going on here in Atlanta and also up in Detroit for the young people at melfarr.org.
All right. Well, like I said, great broadcast tonight. A lot of information. I know we went in a lot of different directions. And again, when we start your football weekend off, we're certainly going to talk about some of the key topics and then some. So glad we had an opportunity to do that. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for being on. Jeremy, as always, thanks. Steve, Mel, what can I say about you guys? You're the best anyway. So,
anybody got a score update on the snooze fest of a game?
I don't know. I'm not looking. I'm just looking at you guys. That's good enough. I'll look at it later. I work on my social media all times of the day. So meanwhile, this is Inside the Pigskin. My name is Scott Morganroth, and I want to thank, on behalf of Jeremy B., Smoking Jeremy B., Steve Ballesteri, and Mel Farr Jr., we want to thank you very much for joining us, and we will catch you next week on Inside the Pigskin. Good night, everybody.